Please God it may terminate successfully for us.
We were told it would be a walkover. Of course, we might expect to be sniped at by a stray German, naturally.
Suppose one should lose one's head and get other men cut up. Suppose one's legs should take fright and refuse to move.
On the morning of July the 1st, 1916, 120,000 British soldiers, most of whom were volunteers, prepared to fight the greatest battle of the First World War. This is the story of the bloodiest day in the history of the British Army, told through the letters and diaries of those who were there. At the end of 1915, the Great War was not going well for Britain and France. After a year and a half of huge effort and heavy losses, large parts of France and most of Belgium remained under German occupation. Both sides had dug in, and a line of trenches stretched from the Channel to Switzerland. In early 1916, in an attempt to break the stalemate, the Allies agreed to a joint summer offensive. The area they chose was a 26-mile section of the Western Front in northern France by the River Somme.
There's a superior view up here, sir.
This is more like it.
It's very good drainage, sir.
No more sitting in the mud in Flanders.
The man in charge of Britain's part in the summer campaign was newly promoted commander of the Fourth Army, General Sir Henry Rawlinson.
It is capital country in which to undertake an offensive. For the observation is excellent, and with plenty of guns and ammunition, we ought to be able to avoid the heavy losses which the infantry have always suffered on previous occasions.
The Allied and German trenches were divided by an 18-mile strip of no man's land, running from the village of Serre in the north to the River Somme in the south. Rawlinson's objective was to drive the Germans from their trenches and liberate the territory they had held for the last year and a half. This would be his battlefield. Under Rawlinson's command was a brand new army. The Fourth Army, made up largely of civilians who had volunteered 18 months ago at the outbreak of war. Typical of this new army was the 22nd Manchester Battalion. They had arrived in France in February 1916. Captain Charlie May was an aspiring author with a wife and baby daughter back in England. He kept a diary of his time on the Somme.
We go because it is right and proper we should. One is supposed to have, as a soldier going into action, no other desire than some high-souled ambition to do or die for his country. Reality, I'm afraid, falls far short.
Hey, it's a hot one, lads. Yeah. Shh. Listen. You can hear the trees whistling for the dogs.
I do not think there is one high-souled one among us. On the contrary, we're all rather bored with the job. And we are all so painfully ordinary. When one is tired and unwashed, I think one is legitimately entitled to refuse to feel noble.
In the same battalion was Sergeant Richard H. Tawney. A Christian socialist, he opposed war, but had volunteered after Germany invaded Belgium, turning down an officer's commission to serve in the ranks.
Hatred of the enemy is not common, I think, among those who are here. For how can you do your duty as a soldier if you hate him? To kill in hatred would be murder. I don't think we're murderers. Just executioners.
What do you think they'll call the battle, Sarge?
I don't know. Thiepval, perhaps. The Battle of Mametz.
Call it anything. It takes two sides to make a battle.
Unlike Germany and France, Britain did not have a vast conscript army to mobilize at the outbreak of war. Minister for War, Lord Kitchener, realized Britain needed a much bigger army if she was to influence the war in Europe. He appealed for 100,000 volunteers. Within 5 months, over 1 million men had responded to the call. A year and a half later, many were destined for the Somme. Like thousands of others, Cyril Josie lied about his age to enlist. He had volunteered to the 2nd Devonshire Battalion when he was just 15. He regularly wrote to his mother and sisters Ivy and Myrtle back home in Redruth.
That's my sister, and that's my mum. What's so funny?
Dearest Mert, we have just come back from church parade and Holy Communion. Chaplain asked me my name and where I came from. Said he'd toured through Cornwall once in a motor. Asked me how old I was too. Of course, I couldn't tell a chaplain a fib, so I told him. Patted me on the back, said, "Splendid, splendid." Not bad of him, was it? Hope that Ivy and Mother are getting on all right. Tell them before my birthday I expect to be home on leave. Goodbye and God bless you all. Love from Cyril. P.S. If Mother has any funds, ask her to send my Bible and football boots.
General Rawlinson's plan for the Somme was shaped by one major concern. Aware that his volunteer battalions had no battle experience, he opted for a simple strategy.
It does not appear to me that the gain of 2 or 3 kilometers of ground is of much consequence. Our aim, rather, should be to kill as many Germans as possible with the least loss to ourselves. Bite and hold, gentlemen. Take what the Germans have, all along here, and invite them to try and take it back.
The German army had arrived on the Somme on September the 27th, 1914, and dug its first trench. A year and a half later, that trench had grown into a formidable defensive system. Swathes of barbed wire ran in front of a string of fortified villages, machine gun posts, and underground bunkers. Rawlinson's strategy was simple. A long artillery bombardment would destroy the German trenches and kill their soldiers. Then his infantry would march, unopposed, across no man's land. They would then repeat the process, trench by trench, across the entire front.
Wir dachten schon, du wärst nach Hause gegangen. Hier ist doch zu Hause. Lass mal versuchen, das ist ein ganz...
With bunkers up to 40 feet underground, often with electric light, for German conscripts like Private Eversmann, the Somme was one of the safest places on the Western Front. He kept a diary of his time there.
We sit here doing not very much. Apart from the rats and lice, who are always with us, it is not too bad.
Riech doch mal. Hast du doch nicht selber gefüllt, oder?
Du bist der Abschaum der deutschen Armee.
Prost! Möge uns Verdun erspart bleiben.
Für immer. Und darauf, dass die Preußen nicht hierher kommen und uns den ganzen Spaß verderben.
In just 2 months, they would face the biggest attack the British had mounted in 2 years of war.
It must become second nature! Stick him!
Rawlinson's volunteer army may not have had battle experience, but it was well trained. For 16-year-old volunteer Cyril Josie, drill in the British Army's traditional weapon was relentless.
Dearest Ivy, stand back. I've got my own rifle and bayonet. New ones. Some of the equipment is lagged with dirt. Been in the trenches. Mine's a fairly new one. With the bayonet fixed, it reaches up to my ear from the ground. Must feel a bit rummy to run onto one of them in a charge. Not ours.
Don't tickle him! Turn the fucker inside out! Give me that rifle. Long point! Whack! Withdraw! Whack! Symbol!
Nearly got it hot today. I had my bayonet fixed in my room with the sheath off and pointed it at another chap. Just then the sergeant walked in.
Keep those lights straight!
By George, didn't he swear? He told me it was one of the greatest crimes in the army to point your bayonet at anyone. Said I could have got 3 months confinement.
Become second nature!
Anyway, he went off in a good temper for after a while I gave him a woodbine.
You miserable little bastard!
With 6 weeks to go before the attack, the previously quiet Somme sector was undergoing a transformation. Shells had to be stockpiled, roads had to be built, drains dug, water pipes and telephone lines laid. Like many battalions destined for the big push, the Manchesters provided the labour for this huge task. A clerk before he joined the Manchesters, Arthur Burke described the preparations for attack to his brother back home.
My dear Reg, now here's the excitement. We're digging a trench in front of our own line. Now you know what that means. A shiver came down our backs when we knew we were for it.
I don't know why we're fighting for this solemn place. If it were mine, I'd give it to them, save all the fuss.
Don't worry about them buggers. If the name's on it, it's got it.
Of course, Fritz heard us coming, so he began giving us a warm time. And you know you can't dig without making a noise. So when we did start, our friend over the way didn't have to get his wind up. We were dodging and digging from 11 till 2:30 a.m. Wasn't we glad when time was up? We've been in the line since Tuesday, doing 6 days in the firing line and 4 days in reserve. This last time has been a bugger.
For Captain May and Sergeant Tawney, censoring the men's letters was a daily duty.
I hate doing this.
It's amazing what you discover, though, isn't it? About the men, I mean.
I'd rather not know some of it.
You know Dooley, Prince's platoon? He was sitting on the Parados one night, while the batteries were firing. One of our shells, pitched short, entered the ground with a fierce thud right under the spot where the man was sitting. It was a dud.
Lucky old Dooley.
God bless the fool who made that shell, he said. Never even troubled to change his position. Of the soldier's internal life, at first you realize nothing. No doubt here and there are boys to whom the holiday from parents, schoolmasters or employers is an exhilaration. But in the letters of the rank and file who have spent a winter in the trenches, you will not find war described as sport.
Cyril Josie wrote home describing the build-up for the big push with the 2nd Devonshires.
My dearest mother, we had rather a rough time. We've been working on building the parapet thicker besides doing sentry duty, so we can only get a little sleep between reliefs. If I have 3 hours sleep in 24 hours, I consider I have done well. I hope you have not been worrying. God bless you, Cyril.
The increased Allied activity on the Somme had not gone unnoticed. When Rawlinson received reports that the Germans were reinforcing their defences, he demanded to see for himself. the Germans had not been idle. Beyond their 2 existing lines, a whole new trench system neared completion. It was an ominous sign to Rawlinson that the Germans intended to fight hard to hold every single yard.
Es ist keine Zeit, um Sehenswürdigkeiten zu besichtigen! Fertig? Los!
Machine gun units were the backbone of the German defence on the Somme.
Na gut.
One well-positioned Maxim could lay down a hail of bullets over a distance of 3,000 yards. Lieutenant Franz Kassel and his unit were in a state of high alert.
Besser. Also, das Ganze nochmal.
France had already lost over 1 million men in the fight for its survival. Still locked in a life-and-death struggle with the Germans at the beleaguered city of Verdun, they could only commit 5 divisions to the offensive on the Somme. Henri Fraise had been rejected due to poor health when he volunteered in 1914. After the army's recent losses, the father of 3 was now considered fit to fight.
Dear father, I have been back in the trenches for 5 days. It's been fine weather here, quite hot, so we don't have to scratch about in the mud, which is never enjoyable.
J'espère vous revoir, votre joli sourire.
I have not got bigger. Damn Jerry took all my fat. I hope they won't get my skin.
Over 1.5 million shells had been stockpiled in preparation for the bombardment, more than the British had fired in the first 12 months of the war. General Rawlinson was under no illusion about the challenge facing his inexperienced army. Yet he remained convinced that with the right amount of guns and ammunition, he could destroy the German defences and avoid heavy British casualties. On June the 24th, 5 days before the attack, the guns began the methodical destruction of the German trenches. The biggest bombardment the British Army had ever mounted. Day and night, the barrage never stopped. Forced to take shelter in their bunkers underground, the Germans waited for the barrage to lift. At Thiepval, Lieutenant Kassel and his machine gun crew were in the defences nicknamed the Wonderwork.
We were exhausted and slept as much as one could. The noise of the barrage was so constant, it prevented sleep for overtired people.
Entschuldigung. Habe ich das letzte Mal schon gelacht, als du das gemacht hast?
Ich wollte dir noch eine zweite Chance geben.
Gib mir noch eine dritte Chance und ich hau dir eins in die Fresse!
Jetzt hört endlich auf zu ratschen! Richtige Bälle einfach.
There
There was only one anxiety. Could one rely on the sentries? They stood on the top steps of the dugout and had to watch across the parapet to see whether the enemy was coming across. Day long, night long. And not all men are heroes.
In the south of the battlefield, astride the River Somme, the French artillery joined in the bombardment. With 900 heavy guns along their 8-mile front, the French had 4 times the number of guns per mile than the British.
Coordonnées! Gauche, 500 mètres! Gauche, 500 mètres!
They also had experience.
Droite, 450! Droite, 450!
Ex-schoolteacher Charles Barberon had been with the artillery 2 years.
We start a slow, methodical bombardment. Every single hit is observed.
Ça traîne beaucoup trop. Les fusées vont se rendre compte de ce qu'on est en train de faire. On va rater l'effet surprise.
Ça prend forcément du temps. Si on n'a pas assez pilonné, il faudra faire attention aux mitrailleuses. Correction!
The Germans don't respond much. They can't have many guns in this sector.
As the Allied bombardment entered its 3rd day, aerial reconnaissance reported the apparent destruction of the German front line. Trenches had been levelled, lines of supply and communication cut.
Halt! Ich bin's!
Holed up in his bunker, conditions for Private Eversman had already deteriorated.
Von der MG-Einheit.
Die hatten was übrig?
Jeder hat seinen Anteil genommen.
How long will it go on? In the last 12 hours, they estimate that 60,000 shells have fallen in our sector. Every communication has been cut.
Sag mal, gibt's Neuigkeiten aus dem hinteren Front?
Nichts. Die Briten scheinen uns am langen Arm verhungern lassen zu wollen.
It cannot last much longer. They say their munitions will soon be done. But when will they attack? Tomorrow? The day after? Who knows?
After 4 days and 4 nights under constant bombardment, Private Eversman wrote what he believed would be his final diary entry.
My head is like a madman's. The tongue sticks to the roof of the mouth. Almost nothing to eat and nothing to drink. And no sleep. All contact with the outer world cut. Haven't we had enough of this frightful horror? This hell concert? If I may not see my loved ones again, I greet them with that last farewell.
With 1 day to go before the attack, General Rawlinson's plan appeared to be working. He believed his artillery had destroyed the German defences. All along the front line, thousands of British troops readied themselves for the fight with the enemy that they had volunteered for almost 2 years ago.
Sir.
Over there.
Captain Charlie May of the 22nd Manchesters recorded the final countdown to attack.
More orders. Still they come. The foolscap is piling up into formidable piles. One almost begins to feel that if any mistake is made in the fight, it will be from over-organization.
Rawlinson's meticulous plan detailed the objective of every single man due over the top.
So that's A Company on the left, then us, B, and D Company. We're all in the first wave going over at 0 hour. So, we'll follow a creeping barrage laid down by our 18-pounders to Black Trench, a gentle walk. Then, when we get here, the barrage will lift on to the next target over there in Danzig Alley. We will then reassemble, ready for the final objective, which, as you're all aware, is here and here. Sergeant.
Every 10th man will wear one of these polished pieces of metal on his back to enable our artillery to spot our progress.
And if the sun doesn't shine, sir?
Oh, I'm quite sure GHQ will have organised that. Finally, the use of the word retire is absolutely forbidden, and if heard, can only be a ruse of the enemy and must be ignored. Good. Carry on, Sergeant.
Captain Charlie May and the 250 men of B Company were to attack from trenches 150 yards away from the German lines at Marmetz. Their objective was to take a series of enemy trenches, culminating in Bunny Alley and Fritz Trench. Then, just one day before the attack was due to start, heavy showers and low cloud descended on the Somme. With poor visibility hampering his artillery, Rawlinson decided to postpone the attack 48 hours until July the 1st. "120,000 men, poised for attack, were ordered to wait.
Come on, then. Come on, then, rockets. Come on. Oh, yes. Roll that one like a Yorkshireman.
And so here we still are, with speculation rife and rumours bright and rumours grave, twiddling our thumbs and wondering.
This one's for you, Andrews.
Okie dokie, Thomas. Come along.
All dressed up and nowhere to go.
The news from everywhere today is excellent. The moment seems very auspicious for us to strike.
On the eve of battle, the 22nd Manchesters finally left their billets and moved up to the front line. Aside from their standard equipment, men carried 250 rounds of ammunition, 2 Mills bombs, a waterproof sheet, sandbag, field dressing, emergency ration including biscuit, smoke helmet, wire cutters, pick and shovel, with the heaviest tools carried by the strongest men. Others carried barbed wire, fence posts, field telephones, even carrier pigeons. Such was the confidence in the artillery bombardment. The men carried everything they would need to take and hold the German trenches. Sergeant Tawney described his feelings as he marched up to the front.
This immense, overwhelming tranquility of sky and down, uniting us millions of enemies and allies in its solemn, unavoidable embrace, dwarfed into insignificance the wrath of man and his feverish energy of destruction. It was a perfect evening. One forgot the object for which we were marching to the trenches.
Is that the new rest home?
Whatever faith General Rawlinson had in his artillery, he was prepared for heavy casualties. He ordered that 18 ambulance trains be standing by to evacuate the wounded. American heiress Mary Borden had left Chicago to work for the Red Cross at the outbreak of war. She had since set up a mobile hospital attached to the French army.
10 kilometers from here along the road is the place where men are wounded. This is the place where they are mended. We send our men up the broken road between bushes of barbed wire, and they come back to us, one by one, in ambulances lying on stretchers. We conspire against their right to die. We experiment with their bones, their muscles, their blood.
Vous avez tout ce qu'il vous faut? Très bien.
Mademoiselle, je vous aime.
When we hurt them, they try not to cry. Often, they apologize for dying.
On the eve of battle, 120,000 men squeezed into the British frontline trenches. The artillery barrage was to continue until the very moment they were scheduled to attack, 7:30 a.m., 0 hour. Now 17, Cyril Josie was with the 2nd Devonshires in the front line facing Ovillers.
My dearest mother, so sorry I haven't written before, but after I wrote you last we went in the trenches and it was too wet to write. Weather spanking up to now, though Fritz chucks his weight about a bit just to relieve the monotony. Lots of skylarks singing over the lines. We hear one first just before standing to arms in the morning. Ivy asks whether I've grown taller, shorter, thinner or stouter. Well, I think I've grown a bit taller and bigger. About 5'6.5" I must be now. Was 5'4 3/4 when I enlisted. We'll write again soon as poss. Goodbye for time and God bless you all. Best love from Cyril.
Fritz knows all about it. Put a bloody great sign up on the wire. When your bombardment starts, we're going to bugger back 5 miles. Kitchener's buggered, you're buggered, we're buggered. Let's all bugger off home.
At midnight, Sergeant Tawney and the Manchesters had yet to reach their positions in the front line.
I don't know anything more exasperating than walking 1 to 2 miles with a stoppage every 10 or 20 yards. Especially when you're one of a long string of tired men and have a rifle and other traps hitched to you.
Come on, what is the problem up there?
There's a box up, Sarge.
You and you, get these men shifted.
Sorry, pal.
It was 2 in the morning before the Manchesters finally reached their positions.
What in fuck's name is that for?
That's now. I'm taking this as well.
Oh, you're pulling my leg, aren't you?
You won't be laughing when you see what Fritz has got. Butcher's knives. That fucking long. For you. Thank you. The orders have come down. 0 hours, 7:30. Heard some of the men singing the Marseillaise earlier on. You know,
I know what it is. If you want to know, I don't give a damn about France. The Jerrys can have it. Well, we're here now. And they're not going to push us around.
Like many, Captain Charlie May had considered the possibility he might not survive the coming battle.
I must not allow myself to dwell on the personal. There is no room for it here. Also, it is demoralizing. But I do not want to die. Not that I mind for myself. If I have to go, I am ready. But the thought I may never see you or our darling baby again turns my bowels to water. I cannot think of it with even a semblance of equanimity. It may well be that you will only have to read these lines as ones of passing interest. On the other hand, they may well be my last message to you. Know through all of your life that I loved you and baby with all my heart and soul. That you two sweet things were just all the world to me. I pray God I may do my duty. For I know you would not have it otherwise.
Saturday, July the 1st, 1916. The British Army prepared to launch its biggest attack of the First World War. Its volunteer army, untried in battle, was about to face the ultimate test. Sergeant Tawney witnessed the final frenzied bombardment of the German line.
It was not a noise, but a symphony. It did not move, it hung over us. It was as though the air were full of a vast and agonized passion bursting into groans and sighs. One had only to lift one's eyes to be appalled by the writhing of the tormented elements above.
"10 miles north, the 2nd Middlesex had the greatest distance to their objective. 750 yards of no man's land, nicknamed Mash Valley. Second Lieutenant Alfred Bundy had completed officer training 3 weeks ago. He kept a journal of his time at the front.
It is freely stated that there will be no resistance. Our drum fire has been going on for days, and the German lines appear to be pulverized. Surely nothing can live there.
Lieutenant! Those men up there, get them down!
It's a walkover, sir!
It's nothing of the kind! Get them down now!
Inspired by the final barrage, optimism ran high throughout the British front line. In a last-minute diary entry, Captain Charlie May expressed his private concerns.
Our gunnery has wrecked his front-line trenches, all right. But we do not yet seem to have stopped his machine guns. These are popping off all along our parapet as I write. I trust they will not claim too many of our lads before the day is over.
Arthur Burke had already sent to his brother back home what he knew might be his last letter.
My dear Reg, these are a special few lines which I want you to take care of until perhaps you hear from me again. Everything at present is absolutely thumbs up. It's very cheerful, still very bright and trusting to the best of luck. Remember me sincerely to my numerous, kind, good old friends. My dearest love to Ma, Tot, Monty and babies. Trusting this is au revoir, not goodbye. Your loving brother, Paddy.
For Richard H. Tawney, the greatest fear was of failing in his duty.
Suppose one should lose one's head and get other men cut up.
Give it here, Jimmy!
Suppose one's legs should take fright and refuse to move. Undoubtedly man walks between precipices, and no one knows the rottenness in him until he cracks. And then it's too late.
Harry, your watch, can I?
Thanks. Here, it's difficult, let me. Good luck. See you in Danzig Alley.
Do not shout! Do not run! And for God's sake, boys, do not bunch!
Dearest Ive, just time to write a few lines before the post goes. Suppose I'll get leave soon. So Myrtle's complexion will soon be restored, will it? Oh, these horrors of war. Well, goodbye for a time, Ive dear. Love to all, Cyril.
Four miles behind the front line, Rawlinson and his staff officers watched the culmination of their months of planning.
Now. Come on.
God's sake! Get us going!
Right on schedule, at 7:30 a.m., along the entire 18-mile front, 60,000 men left their trenches and started out across no man's land.
Stay with me, won't you? You'll see me, Jimmy, and we'll be fine. Will you be with me? Look, it's just a short walk. One end of Old Trafford to the other.
Lieutenant Cassel and his machine gun crew had survived the bombardment.
Oh my God.
Das ist es jetzt! Los, los, los! Macht schon! Macht schon!
Like thousands of other German soldiers, the end of the barrage was their cue to leave their bunkers and defend their front line.
Lass doch mal auf mit dir!
No, boys. We are still alive. The moles have come out of their holes.
Sie kommen! Sie kommen!
In the south of the battlefield, the 22nd Manchesters led the attack on Mametz.
900 yards of rough ground to the trench that was our first objective,
No bunch on your left!
and about 1,500 to a further trench where we were to wait for orders.
Our colonel had watched us mount the steps, and his last remarks were, "Isn't it wonderful?" We extended to 6 paces and walked. One could have thought we were at Belton Park or at our other training headquarters.
In the centre of the battlefield, the 2nd Middlesex were halfway across Mash Valley.
Don't bunch back there, keep formation!
It was the first time Lieutenant Bundy had led a platoon in battle.
My platoon continued to advance in good order until we had reached nearly halfway to the Boche front line.
Steady, Middlesex!
Here they come. The cocky yellows.
Schussweite! 300 Meter! Fertig! Feuer! Down!
I shouted down, but most of those that were not hit had already taken what cover they could find. In all directions came pitiful groans and cries of pain.
Less than a mile away, the 2nd Devonshires started their attack at Ovillers. Cyril Josie was in the first wave at 7:30.
We went over with the feeling in us of the song, over the top, and never come back again. People say you go absolutely mad. You don't. I've never felt so cool and matter-of-fact in all my life. I was surprised. But I was still more surprised by the reception. Of course, we might expect to be sniped at by a stray German, naturally. You know what a hailstorm is. Well, that's about the chance one stood of dodging the bullets, shrapnel, etc. Old Johnny has had me for a target for over 13 months, chucked all kinds of stuff at me, from coal boxes to iron foundries. He only managed to put a bullet through my shoulder. Must have been that stray sniper.
In the far south, the Manchesters had crossed no man's land and taken the enemy trench that was their first objective in 15 minutes.
Stay sharp, you men.
They had a further 3 trenches to take that morning.
It's all like this. It'll be a cakewalk.
I hate touching wounded men.
Sarge?
Moral cowardice, I suppose.
I've seen him. Just you keep building that step.
One hurts them so much and there's so little to be done.
We're losing the barrage. Leave the wounded, get the men ready to move.
All right, lads, this is it!
As Captain May's company moved on to their next objective, they were 3 minutes behind schedule. The artillery barrage covering their advance on Danzig Alley had already moved forward, allowing the Germans to man their defences. With the battle underway, General Rawlinson arrived at 4th Army headquarters.
Enemy barrage reported feeble. I know that. I was there. Anything in the last few minutes?
From 8th Division, sir.
Gentlemen, we'd broken through the German line.
The early reports reaching Rawlinson were positive. In reality, the attack was faltering along most of the British front. The only significant breakthrough was at Mametz, in the south, beside the French sector.
Get a firing position and keep that bloody Maxim's head down! For Christ's sake, leave him. Get in next to Sergeant Tony.
The Manchesters had taken their first objective, but had since come under fierce German counterattack.
Who the fuck did that?
The Germans were brave men, as brave as lions. It was insane. It seemed one couldn't miss them. Every man I fired at dropped, except one. Him, the boldest of the lot, I missed more than once. Not that I wanted to hurt him. It was missing I hated. That's the beastliest thing in war. The damnable frivolity. One's like a mischievous ape, tearing up the image of God. God forgive us all.
At 8:30, An hour into the attack, some 60,000 British soldiers had been sent into battle. Less than a third had achieved their objectives. In just 60 minutes, it is estimated that 30,000 had become casualties. Half of the first wave were dead or wounded in no man's land. Throughout the morning, a further 60,000 British soldiers went over the top. Emerging from their trenches to face fierce German machine gun and artillery fire. For Lieutenant Cassel and his machine gun unit, the advancing troops were an easy target.
Runter! Runter! Runter gleich!
Second Lieutenant Alfred Bundy's first experience of battle had been watching his platoon die in no man's land.
All right there. Where is it? German line. Which way?
That way!
By mid-morning, tens of thousands of men were pinned down, wounded or dead in no man's land. News that the attack was not going to plan had reached General Rawlinson at 4th Army headquarters.
I think I understand. They can't both be right. Have we consolidated in Serre, or are we in retreat?
The 31st is in Serre.
I'd like to believe you, but at this moment I'm not sure I can. Message to Goth. Tell him the cavalry won't be moving before 1400.
Rawlinson's only significant breakthrough was in the south. But amidst the confused reports arriving at headquarters, rather than push home the advance with his cavalry, he decided to wait. After initial success, Captain May and Sergeant Tawney were in dire need of reinforcement.
We've got about 20 men fit for something! Where the hell are A Company? Our right flank's in the air! They can't have just disappeared! I'll find them! Wait! Your men! 3 rounds rapid fire now!
In a desperate search for more men, Sergeant Tawney set off back towards the British lines.
course, it was idiotic. If our company had lost half or more of its strength, why should A Company have fared any better? But there. I suppose the idea of death in mass takes a lot of hammering into one before one grasps it.
Reinforce! Forward!
Tawny's search for reinforcements was over. Astride the River Somme, the French attack was going well. Signaller Henri Fraisse was with the fighting at Curlew.
Hey! Ouais, nous avons besoin d'artillerie. Un tir de barrage sur la ferme de Curlew, code 314.
Allô, on a besoin d'un tir de barrage sur la ferme de Curlew. La code 314. Code 314, terminé.
I found myself among the troops who took Curlew. We were almost captured.
Qu'est-ce qu'ils foutent, bon sang? C'est pas bon. Demande-leur de rallonger le tir de 20 mètres.
Unlike the strictly timetabled British attack, the French guns were more flexible, providing close support for the infantry.
A bit of shelling from our artillery soon made the Germans scamper. I buried a German helmet that I had taken as a trophy. I was afraid I would have been shot if we were captured.
By midday, Rawlinson had started to learn the full extent of the failure of his plan.
Is it true? We're not in Thiepval.
It's been pretty brisk.
And sir?
Sharp there too.
The bloody French are in. They started later, now they've overtaken us. For God's sake, they're waiting for us!
Cavalry, sir. Sir, General Haig would like to know when the cavalry will move today.
French casualties had already started to arrive at Mary Borden's hospital.
It was my business to know which of the wounded could wait, and which could not. If I made any mistakes, someone would die on their stretchers on the floor under my eyes, who need not have died.
Donnez-lui de l'eau si l'on réclame.
I've learned to read the signs, from what is written on their tickets, and from the way they look, and the way they feel to my hand. My hand can tell of itself one kind of cold from another, can tell the difference between the cold of night and the stealthy cold of death. This is the second battlefield. The battle is going on over the helpless bodies of these men.
Un blessé au poumon vient d'arriver, vous pouvez le prendre?
Dans 5 minutes. Mademoiselle, attachez ses bras.
Qu'est-ce que vous faites?
It is we who are doing the fighting now, with their real enemies.
At noon, after 8 days underground, Private Eversman was still fighting hard to defend the German line. Lieutenant Alfred Bundy had been pinned down in a shell hole in no man's land since the attack started 4.5 hours ago.
I occasionally attempted to move to my right and left, but bullets were forming an impenetrable barrier. I was almost tempted to take a chance and crawl back in daylight. I was dreading the dark, for I thought I should lose my sense of direction in my distraught condition.
Out of the 800 men of Lieutenant Bundy's battalion who attacked that morning, 540 were wounded or killed. Across the whole battlefield, an estimated 50,000 British soldiers had become casualties. The 16 stretchers per battalion were woefully inadequate. Thousands of men died of their wounds alone in no man's land.
This is death. I don't know what most men feel like when they're wounded. What I felt was that I'd been hit by a tremendous iron hammer, swung by a giant of inconceivable strength, and then twisted with a sickening sort of wrench.
Stretcher! Bear it!
Of course, it was imbecile and cowardly.
Stretcher bearers!
They couldn't hear me, and if they could, they oughtn't to have come.
Stretcher bearers!
It was asking them to commit suicide. But I'd lost my self-respect.
Stretcher bearers!
The French attack in the south had been a total success. They had taken their objectives and captured thousands of prisoners. As he prepared to advance, Charles Barbarin reflected on the cost of victory.
They don't look too unhappy with their fate. They've done their duty because they were obliged to. What's the point of condemning these poor people? the real culprits are safe and cannot be reached.
After more than 6 hours of fighting, the 22nd Manchesters had still not taken Danzig Alley. Captain Charlie May was unaware that his friend Sergeant Tawney was lying wounded a few hundred yards away.
Ready, lads! 1, 2, 3, come on!
Stick 'em! Stick 'em, lads!
Private Arthur Burke described how the Manchesters fought their way through the enemy trenches.
It was hell. Bombing was the start here. We threw many bombs down, especially smoke bombs. And the hounds came up, crawling, half dead. We stuck the blighters and put them out of time. They threw up their hands. Mercy, camarade. We give 'em mercy. I don't think.
Stick 'em! Stick 'em, lads!
Albert Andrews was unprepared for his face-to-face encounter with the enemy.
Oh, bitte, mein Herr, bitte. Lassen Sie mich am Leben. Ich habe 3 Töchter, die jüngste ist erst 2. Meine arme Frau muss den ganzen Hof alleine machen, bitte. Haben Sie Erbarmen, lassen Sie mich leben.
I was on guard and had my bayonet at his chest. He was trembling and looked half mad. He was saying something to me which I did not understand.
Das gehört alles Ihnen, das alles. Bitte bringen Sie mich nicht um. Bitte. Ich bitte, ich flehe Sie an.
All I could make out was that he did not want me to kill him.
Ruhig, Bert. Oh, bitte. Allmächtiger, habe Erbarmen, haben Sie Erbarmen. Ich bin nur ein Mensch. Ich will doch diesen Krieg auch nicht, bitte. Haben Sie Erbarmen. Denken Sie an meine arme Frau, meine armen Kinder. Bitte.
Look at him!
Gott, ich flehe dich an. Lass die Engländer mit mir Erbarmen haben. Bitte.
Come on! Go on! Get out of it! Go!
Soft. That's for my brother! And that's for when they're in the trenches!
That kind of thing was going on all along the line. No Germans being spared. Wounded were killed by us all. We hadn't exactly been told no prisoners, but were given to understand that was what was wanted. Same kind of thing occurred at the 2nd German trench, and the 3rd.
We took far too many prisoners. They numbered about 1,000 and they didn't deserve being spared. We captured many guns, etc. All sorts of souvenirs. But the souvenir I treasure most is my life. Pray to God, Reg, and thank him for sparing me such mercy.
Captain Charlie May was not so blessed. His body was found outside Danzig Alley. No one saw him die.
My darling, au revoir. Know through all your life that I loved you and baby with all my heart and soul. That you two sweet things were just all the world to me.
May's battalion had taken their objectives at enormous cost. Of the 820 men of the 22nd Manchesters who had attacked that morning, 472 had been killed, were wounded, or missing. Despite the British breakthrough in the south by Mametz, along most of the 18-mile front, fierce German resistance had effectively destroyed the attack. Lieutenant Kassel had been wounded earlier in the day in the fighting at Diepval. By late afternoon, he was able to leave his machine gun unit to receive first aid.
Another half hour, and it becomes clear that the attack has been repelled. Hartbrich is alive, but stunned by gas poisoning. I find Captain Meschenbier of the 3rd Company suffering from a heart attack. Now only a few men from the 2nd line remained alive.
Only in the south, astride the River Somme, had the attack successfully driven the Germans wholesale from their defences. Charles Barbarin was one of the first to enter the newly liberated village of Curlu.
Never before this day have I witnessed such devastation. Not a house in the village remains intact.
Les catholiques.
Ils étaient certainement bavarois. Even the people who lived here will not be able to recognize where their homes once were.
It was not yet apparent that July the 1st had been the worst day in British military history. But of the 120,000 soldiers Rawlinson had sent into attack, nearly half had become casualties. Over 19,000 men had been killed. Of the 35,000 wounded on the battlefield, only a fraction were evacuated to hospital. Thousands died in no man's land, of wounds which, if treated, should not have been fatal. After hours lying in no man's land, Sergeant Tawney was found by a medical officer.
He can't have been more than 25, but his face seemed to shine with love and comprehension. He listened like an angel while I told him a confused yarn. Then he said I had been shot by a rifle bullet and gave me morphia. Later I realized he thought I was done for. But after I felt that divine compassion flow over me, I didn't care. I was like a dog, kicked and bullied by everyone, that at last had found a master. We are your ghosts in this game played by monkeys, organized by lunatics.
At Mary Borden's hospital, ambulances continued to bring wounded men from the battlefield.
The air was thick with steaming sweat, mud, dirt, and blood. I'm not hungry. I'm not tired. I am busy.
Mademoiselle, venez par ici.
Je suis occupée.
C'est vous qu'il lui faut.
It is a scene in eternity, in some strange dream hell where I'm glad to be employed, where I belong. We are locked together, the wounded and I.
C'est un Anglais? Qu'est-ce qu'il fait là? English? You're wounded in the stomach. You'll be fine. La morphine tant qu'il en faut.
The same thing is throbbing in us. The single thing, the one life. We are one body, suffering and bleeding.
Private Eversman was one of 8,000 estimated German casualties. His diary was found on the evening of July the 1st.
What will be the outcome? Heaven knows. Shall I live to see the breaking of a new day?
For the Allied commanders, there was no question of abandoning the offensive. With many wounded still in no man's land, fighting resumed on July the 2nd. 17-year-old Cyril Josie was one of the lucky ones. Wounded in the first 5 minutes of the battle, he was evacuated to England.
My dearest Ive, I couldn't get back to our own lines until next morning. I didn't eat anything, but lived on pulling off dead men's water bottles. About 6 a.m. I began crawling back. Old Johnny sniped at me all the way back, but I dodged him by getting in the shell holes. I heard of our battalion, 27 answered roll call after the battle. So you can imagine, 27 out of 1,000 men. Thank you awfully for the postal order. Love to Father, Mother, Amber. Cyril. Oh, can you please send me one of those 6.5p writing tabs and some stamps, please?
Like so many others, Captain Charlie May was buried where he fell. Over the following days, a shockwave travelled through the British Isles as thousands of telegrams told mothers, wives and lovers that their men would not be coming home. The battle on the Somme ground murderously on, a bloody war of attrition, until it fizzled out in November 1916. It ended on roughly the same ground on which it had begun. Both sides bled dry. The final combined casualty figure for the British, French and German soldiers who fought there was over 1 million dead, wounded or missing.